I grew up in an era where every few years, what games could be, visually, but also from a game design standpoint, was just massively revolutionized every few years. You went from not even be able to render in 3D to 3D that looked awful to 3D that looked something like reality, but then we got much more, pixels on the screen, much more characters on the screen, much more models, and then pushing that up to faster load times, super fast SSDs, higher resolutions, 60 FPS is more of the norm, still not all the time on consoles. And then, it's really revolutionary every few years. But then we run into some situations that are a little bit out of that paradigm. And we start seeing things like this. We have the director of Final Fantasy XIV saying there's no need of the PlayStation 6 and Xbox Next from a gamer's perspective. And it kind of blew my mind for a second, but then I started thinking about it and just like, man, really, like as a kid, again, every few years we got something just revolutionary, right? Like this progress happened as I was growing up in a relatively short time frame. And yet now it's like, okay, once you're here, where do we go from there? I'm not saying it can't get better. There's things like path tracing. You could run at higher resolutions, higher frame rates, get even more stuff on the screen. But man, like when you put things like this side by side, I just, like there is a huge difference. And then this to this, huge difference, huge difference. You're already starting to see a bit of a diminishing return here, and maybe Spider-Man's not the best example since even the PS5 version here was kind of just an upgrade to the same game, but there were some noticeable advantages here in resolution, getting some ray traced reflections, things like that. But let me give an example of this. So we now have the PlayStation 5 Pro. Now the PlayStation 5 Pro is an example of really the best hardware they could get in a relatively expensive price point. We're talking the $700 plus range, several years into a console's lifespan. And look at this. This is the PS5 performance mode in Metal Gear Solid Delta up against the PS5 Pro. I was going to say performance mode, but they only give you one mode, which is supposed to be kind of like the best of both worlds. So the PS5's performance mode frame rates with the quality modes, visual settings. But here's the thing, like, look at this. First of all, the PS5 Pro frame rate wise is actually performing worse than the PS5's performance mode in a number of scenes. But theoretically, what you're getting in turn for that is increased visual settings. But look, I mean, look at this. Like, yes, there are differences. But when we look back at something like this, we see like revolutionary jumps. It's very easy to see what you're getting several years later for, oftentimes the same price or only a modest increase in the price of the hardware. And then we see this. Now, obviously, maybe Metal Gear Solid Delta is not a shining example of optimization or anything like that, and we could talk all sorts of things going on with Unreal Engine 5, etc. But yeah, I just feel like we're in a different paradigm here where, from the gamer's perspective, are they really feeling that, is this the kind of thing that's worth waiting years and still spending hundreds of dollars more for? And on the price side of things, look at this. So this is, I found this on Reddit. So, as far as I could tell, it seems accurate. So we had the PlayStation 5. And here, let me readjust my window here so you can actually see the heading that we're missing here. This is the price at release and then the price after 5 years. So, I'm going to focus on my good old American dollars. But, okay, the PlayStation 1 at release, $299. And I mean, if we adjusted for inflation, that's actually pretty expensive. But after 5 years, they could produce that same hardware for $99. That's 1/3 of the original cost. And then look at the PS2, launching at the same price as the PS1 launched at $299. And then after 5 years, they could cut its price to $149, half the original price. And again, as we're doing this generationally, you're getting some pretty noticeable increases to resolution. Again, if we look at like resolution counts, by the way, this I'm taking some information from this video here by Group M Pro. I will link in the video description to sources. So definitely check out here for a whole bunch of more comparisons in these games together. Did a really nice job on this. But yeah, we're going from like 224, 256 by 224 to 640 by 480, 1280 by 720, 1920, right? So there's a huge resolution jump in also like just the types of things you can do with the graphics, how much you can render at a time, all of that. Big jumps here, right? And then, we have the PlayStation 3. Now, the PlayStation 3 was very expensive at launch, coming in at $599, and then, inflation adjusted, that's even more expensive. So there was a bit of a troubled launch there for the PS3, but they were able to turn things around and get a version out after 5 years at $249. So less than half the original launch price 5 years later. And then they came in with the PlayStation 4. The PlayStation 4 was coming in at $399, so much lower than the original PS3 launch price. More in line with, inflation adjustments, from previous consoles, maybe even below that. And then after 5 years, they were still able to cut that price down to $299. Now, then we have the PlayStation 5. Okay, but also let's look at the PS4 jump, right? So are you going from the PS3, which PS2 to PS3 visually and much more realistic rendering, getting a lot of 720p, so technically high definition, maybe not full HD or anything, but matching a lot of the TVs at the time. You weren't always getting 60 frames per second for sure, oftentimes 30 and sometimes unstable, but big resolution jumps, big jumps in what you could visually deliver, and kind of a disappointing price initially, but then you get that corrected soon after. And then we've got the PlayStation 4 coming in. With the PlayStation 4 coming in, you're jumping up to 1080p in a lot of games, sometimes 60 FPS, sometimes still 30. 30 is still a pretty normal target, but the kinds of things that you can render are certainly, like if we look at a scene like this, sorry, that's PS5, let's go back to PS4. A scene like this is not only running at a much higher resolution than what the PS3 could do, but look how much stuff you have. Look at all those characters in the background, all the vehicles, all the cars. You're getting a pretty revolutionary jump there coming from the PS3 to the PS4, and it came in at a lower initial price point. Then you get the PlayStation 5 coming in at $499, and yeah, we again get some big jumps. Now, resolution's part of it. We're able to support 4K TVs. Some games can actually render at 4K. Some can't really render internally at 4K, but they'll have some kind of upscale to it, or at least in their 30 FPS mode, they might be, something that looks reasonable on a 4K TV, that kind of thing. But there is a big resolution bump. There's, I think one of the biggest just life-changing differences was the super fast SSDs, how fast you could load into games, quick resume stuff, really, really revolutionary. And again, coming in at $399, dropping price after 5 years to $299. And then we have the PlayStation 5 coming in, which didn't, after 5 years, did not drop price. We just a week ago had its price increase to $550. Now, inflation has existed during all of these things, and I don't need to get into a big political thing right now regarding any sort of tariff situation or whatever might be causing this. Just think about the end result for the average gamer and your thoughts about like the next generation of hardware. So it's not that I don't think we can push beyond this. Like I said, we've already seen in the PC space, stuff like an RTX 5090. You can see what the future could be. We could see high refresh rate, 4K, path tracing, all sorts of stuff, which sure, makes some visual difference. And who knows what other sorts of neural rendering techniques come out and all of that. So there is a future. You can push beyond this, but you can't help but feel from the gamer's perspective that, like, yeah, when you were stuck back here at the PS1 and you saw a PS2 or a PS3 and then PS4 and then even PS5, like, you're starting, once you get here, it just feels like a bit of diminishing returns. And then again, if you look at where prices are at, right? The cost of producing that next generation of hardware, we've seen these massive price drops in how expensive the current gen was after 5 years when they're prepping that next console generation. And the current gen right now with the PS5 is increased to $550. That's effectively saying that the best console they can produce right now, at whatever sort of margin they're willing to take, I supposedly, I mean, we can't see their financials there, but they're effectively saying that the PS5 is the best they can do at $550, and if you want something better, it's the PS5 Pro, and that costs hundreds of dollars more, and this is what you get. This is what you get. You can turn the graphics settings up a little bit and might not be able to still lock to 60 FPS. Now, obviously, in a couple of more years, when we would actually expect a PS6 generation, then I do still expect some development there. We have AMD working behind the scenes on their UDNA architecture. We've seen leaks of massive improvements to ray tracing performance. They've got neural rendering techniques. We'll get something more like FSR4, which will be a higher quality upscaler. So even if your internal rendering resolutions are lower, your output could look a lot more like 4K. So there's still something to be had here. But you really feel like from the gamer's perspective as well, like, I mean, if you look at graphics like this, like, obviously, yeah, I would like the internal rendering resolution to be a bit higher, and I'd like a locked 60 FPS, but you kind of feel like a few tweaks in the Unreal Engine 5 here from the developers, and we probably could have been there without a lot of visual cuts. So when you get this kind of talk about there's no need of the PlayStation 6 and Xbox Next from a gamer's perspective, I mean, I'm still the kind of person who is excited about the next generations of hardware, but yeah, compared to as a kid, when you'd see the, sizzle reels of the next gen console, your jaw would drop. It was really exciting. And it's just, I don't know, I feel like some of that excitement has sort of left, and we're starting to instead just get people kind of whining. And I'm not even saying they're necessarily wrong to whine, but I mean, it's like any new game comes out and you're just like, okay, so this runs worse, and I don't really think it looks better. And honestly, there's usually a lot of stuff that does look better than what you actually had a few years ago. But again, it's getting harder to notice, it's getting harder to spot. And we're getting that technological developments, the price points on everything kind of slowing down. Game development too. Like, I think some of the bottleneck in like how good games look is starting to be more on the game development side, right? Like to develop graphics at this level takes a totally different amount of time and work and number of artists, etc., than it does to develop stuff at this level, right? So, I mean, one thing I'm somewhat hoping for with the PS6 generation is stuff that can hopefully actually shrink game development timelines. And I know I might get some pushback on this in the comment section, where I think a lot of people like to, blame the lazy game developers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, that should be more optimized. And honestly, a lot of that's publishers pushing the timelines out, rather than the game developers themselves. So let's make sure we put the blame where maybe blame is due. But one nice thing about where that PS6 type generation is going to be is if the base game design targets are around ray tracing. I know people have a lot of negative thoughts on ray tracing as far as like, oh, my performance is so much worse and does it look that much better? Some people who seem to really like ray tracing is game developers, because if you don't have to bake the lighting, which takes time, or if you're doing a ray tracing implementation but not every version of your game is going to be on ray tracing supported hardware, sometimes you have to release you have to actually do the development work kind of twice, right? I have to, deal with my ray traced version of the game and my not ray traced version of the game, etc. If we're really going to be having hardware where the base console design can handle ray tracing at a level where your lighting models, your reflections, etc., everything, your global illumination, can be handled through ray tracing, I'm hopeful that that can at least speed up game development. I'm also curious about some of the other neural rendering techniques. Now, again, as always, hopefully not at the cost of actual true optimization, etc. But man, we used to get games so much more frequently. And that's one thing that's been really disappointing to me with the current generations, is that as the level of graphics and how big the worlds can be, as everything has grown, it just feels like, well, it doesn't even just feel like, it's just true. Like the game development timelines, how long it takes to get the next game in your beloved game franchise, is just ballooning out of control. Where it's like, you know, you might get like one big game from your favorite developer on an entire like console generation. It's kind of crazy, if that. Whereas, you know, previously you could get a good quality release every year or two, or you know, sometimes less, from big, you know, AAA game studios. So, man, there's just been a huge change in that, and I think that also makes studios kind of a little more risk averse too. If it costs, you know, 5 years of development and hundreds of millions of dollars to develop a game, then the risk on that, man, if that game doesn't just sell like crazy, then boom, studio's gone, fire everybody. You know, like, I don't know, the gaming industry is in a weird place right now. So I'm really hoping that as some of these newer tools become available with the next generation, that maybe it can actually be a bit of a relief to game development timelines. And also if like, you know, more AA style studios can start to put out games that look visually very impressive using these newer techniques, without maybe like needing that massive, you know, development staff and huge timelines and everything. You know, it'd be nice if we could start pushing some of those boundaries again about what's capable in games. And again, as I think the PS6 generation is, I mean, we've seen Sony's Mark Cerny talking about like the excitement about neural rendering and opening up those techniques to game developers, etc. I'm interested if we'll start to see like a shift in the type of game we can have, right? So I know there's a lot of negativity around that kind of thing as well, but you know, I'm curious if we will kind of hit another inflection point where games can have another kind of exciting you know, development period where a lot of new things get tried, etc. So I'm somewhat hopeful that we'll be there. But yeah, I mean, if you're at least looking at the kind of games that people are already playing, they already look pretty good. And the, you know, PS5 style generation hardware, and same thing with the PC space, already runs them pretty well. So like, you do kind of see the point here. So I'm still hopeful, but yeah, it's certainly the case that you're starting to see some kind of diminishing returns in what you're getting for your money and time in the development process. And man, seeing the PS5's price actually increase after 5 years is just complete unprecedented insanity compared to everything that we had ever seen beforehand. And it does make me a little bit nervous about this whole landscape moving forward. But then, you know, maybe we just don't need that same level of infinite growth. Is the PS6 going to be like good enough that we can just stay there for a long time and just make all the games we want to make? I mean, we've always had this kind of like massive exponential growth in what's capable every so many years, but you certainly feel it slowing down. Anyway, what do you guys think about all of this in the comment section? Let me know, and I hope you all have an excellent day.